Hello, I'm Wade Davis with the Coalition of Historical Trekkers. Today we're here at historic Fort Atkinson in Fort Calhoun, Nebraska to talk about period shelters. I know we've had a lot of questions about what it takes to get into the hobby and shelter yourself, and that answer depends on where you're at and what you're doing and your economic level. If you're on a trek in the woods, of course, and the weather is permitting, you can always just sleep under the open stars on a ground cloth with a blanket. That was probably the most historically accurate thing that was done a lot during the period. Of course, you may want to cover yourself, and what we do a lot of times is build a larger tarp, like this one down here in the roll, that can be used both like a cowboy bedroll or can be set up like a lean-to. Now, if you're out in the woods by yourself, you can always build a debris shelter out of sticks and leaf covering and branches, but many state parks don't allow that, so you need to bring a shelter with you. Probably the cheapest to get into is a lean-to like this. This one happens to be a 9x9 cloth that I sewed myself and waterproofed it. The cash outlay is around $100 to $125. It depends on if you start with a water-resistant oilcloth or if you go with a straight canvas. You're better off to use a modern waterproofing that looks period than you are to use the appropriate period materials. Period materials, which is linseed oil thinned with turpentine, is a great waterproofer, but it's also highly flammable. And if you're near a flame source, like a campfire, it can go up in seconds. So we say that what you should do is once you get your color on it, which was referred to in a lot of the journals as Spanish brown or red ochre, which can be achieved today, that once you get your color on it, that your waterproofing be something like Thompson's Water Seal or Olympic Paint On Seal that can be put into a spray bottle or on a brush. The tarp can be laid out in the sun and you apply your waterproofing. It achieves the same effect and is not flammable so long as you stay with the water-based versions and not the oil-based versions. Again, safety is more. We have more options available today, and your safety is sometimes more important than historical authenticity. So like I said, a lean-to, by the time you get your waterproofing, your canvas, and then just your time for a 9x9 will cost you about $125. You can take your simple 9x9 canvas, fold it out flat on the ground, put your blanket, your accoutrements, your musket in it, lay down, and cover yourself over like a burrito. With it being 9x9, you have about 4.5 feet wide and of course 9 feet long, so you can be completely covered in the event of inclement weather or rain. The other thing that you can do is rig it as a lean-to. Historically, this was the most common rigging that's found in illustrations and references on the historical record. All you need for that is a rope or a long pole, rig it between two close trees, rig it down at a 45-degree angle, and either tie off the ends or take your little axe and cut you a couple of stakes, hammer those in the ground, and stake it off. And that'll get you into 99% of the events with a covering that is waterproof. It will not be windproof. I have had mine rip in the wind. I was at an event one time where there were 60 and 70-mile winds come up with a storm. It did rip about 3 foot of the tarp, but the next morning I simply took my repair kit and stitched it back up, and it has worked fine. So the other shelters that you can get into are things like wedge tents, which are an A-frame tent, look like a wedge. They're historically accurate. They're going to run you around $400. You can buy wall tents, which they're going to be upwards to $800 to $1,000. And if you've got a lot of stuff and you really must, there are marquee tents, which are exorbitantly high. But to get into a bare bones reenactment, one of our national gatherings or one of our events, the tarp shelter will get you there and get you there good. When it comes to making your shelter, you want to be sure and not get too heavy a canvas. It's going to absorb quite a bit of waterproofing and add to the weight, so you want to stick with something like an 8-ounce canvas. I know some vendors sell stuff like 14-ounce, but that gives you a whole lot of weight to pack in. I have a hand-woven blanket, which is fairly heavy, and a 9x9 canvas, and on the scale it weighs about 20 pounds, and that's about good to take into a stationary camp. That way I pack in 2 packs. You see here at my feet I have 2 packs. This one over here is actually my blanket, my ground cloth, my food, and all my stuff. That's my trekking pack. It weighs about 25. If I'm on the trail, I sleep under the stars or I make a debris hut. Over here is my stationary camp, my shelter, and it weighs about 20 pounds. It is 8-ounce canvas. It is painted with a red ochre and waterproofed with the Thompson's water seal. So what you want to do is get your canvas. If it has any machine stitching on it and you want to look period appropriate, cut that machine stitching out and just re-stitch it by hand. You'll need a seam ripper to do that, and remember, whenever you're sewing historic articles, Mr. Seam Ripper is your friend. And what you'll want to do, it depends. You can leave the long edges frayed, or you can cut them with pinking shears. Originally things were pinked, that's period appropriate, or you can stitch it and put a hem in it. I have a hem in my ground cloth, but my tarp, my shelter, just has pinked edges. It is not fraying because the waterproofing in the red ochre is binding it together. One of the other things you want to do is you want to put some tie downs on it. And what I've done is cotton cordage. If you get 100% pure cotton cord, like sash cord, was used extensively. And I get a hunk of that about yay long, about 2 foot long, and I take a small rock or a musket ball and poke up in the corner, tie that around it. And I did one about every 18 inches all the way around, so I have tie-off points. Again, if you get an oilcloth that's heavy and comes with grommets, grommets are not period correct. They really weren't in use on clothing and material items until around the time of the 1850s. So if you're doing anything with a COHT, you can have a late period tarp with grommets if you're doing 1850 to 1860. But most of us do early 19th or 18th century, so grommets would not be historically correct. So you want to put some tie downs on it. Now there are some different options for setting it up, and you can Google these. There is, of course, the lean-to. There's the burrito or the cowboy bedroll. The other option is the plow point shelter or the diamond fly. And since it's a perfect square, you can tie one square up about waist high to a tree, stretch it out, stake the other side in, and then stretch the other 2 out in wings. Then you can either put a tie down in the middle to hook it to an upper branch, or cut a small branch and stick in it to hold it up. This is probably the most weatherproof and the most windproof variation. However, I've been unable to document it to the 18th and early 19th century. So if you're at a public event where they have rules, they may call you on it. You may have to go back to a lean-to style. But if you're in the woods by yourself on a trek, a plow point, if there's bad weather, is perfectly acceptable. So if you're on a trek in the woods, it's probably too much to carry a 40-pound pack, so I do not carry the tarp and make a lean-to. I rely more on a debris shelter or a rock face, or if the weather's going to be fine, just sleeping in the open under the stars. Like I said, my trekking pack is about 25 pounds. My shelter and everything is about 20. So if I'm going to a rendezvous or a stationary camp, I simply either lug it all in one big load, or I make 2 trips. I've just come off a 7-day rendezvous in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana, and these 2 packs, other than my weapon and my shoulder bags and my water canteen, were all that I took and managed to live 7 days out of everything. So it can be done. What I'd like to do, if you have any questions or any comments from your own experience, please put them in the comments below the video and let's get some discussion going on tarps and tarp shelters. If you've had experience or you want to know more, you can look things up. As far as debris shelters go, there are a number of bushcraft videos out there and a number of bushcraft books you can buy that show how to make a simple debris shelter that you could throw your small ground cloth and blanket into and be perfectly safe. So for now, that's all we have. I'm Wade Davis with the COHT here at Fort Atkinson, and we will see you out on the trail.